Shadows where the truth hides deep. Echoes of the lost and the secrets they keep. Cold cases burn in the back of your mind. We dig through the dark, one, two at a time. This ain't fiction, this is blood, this is truth. 12-gauge investigative, justice uncaged. We ask the questions that you scared to say, shining a light where the guilty pray from killers.
This is 12-gauge investigative. Let's jump in.
We're built for the case. Just getting started. Justice is just getting started. 12-gauge investigative. We don't miss.
All right. How's everybody doing tonight? My name is 12-gauge and welcome to my channel, 12-gauge Investigative. This is your first time here. Thank you so much for being here. I have a very special guest tonight, Mr. Andy Kahan, and he is going to share his expertise with you guys, and we're going to talk a little bit about true crime tonight, and hopefully he'll give us some knowledge that we can grow from. Without further ado, let me bring Mr. Kahan up to the stage. All right. I can hear you now.
All right, sweet. We're good.
All right. Mr. Kahan, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to 2026, so halfway there.
All right. So you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself? I'm hearing an echo. Good grief.
That
is
I'm
it
not
me?
aware of. Yeah.
Let me see here. Is that better?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Yeah.
Okay, you want to tell the audience a little bit about your expertise?
Sure. My name's Andy Kahan. I'm the Director of Victim Services for Crime Stoppers of Houston. I've been a victim advocate for over 30 some odd years. Prior to that, I spent approximately 8 years as a Harris County adult probation officer and a Texas State parole officer. So I chased Houston's finest all over the county and city. So I was actually the first victim advocate ever to be hired out of a mayor's office. So I was at City Hall in Houston for over 18 years. I served under multiple different mayors. Then I went over to Houston Police Department. And then in 2018, Crime Stoppers made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And kind of like The Godfather, just when I thought I was getting out, they let me back in, start up their organization. Crime Stoppers, if you do not know, is a 501c3 nonprofit. We're the leading public safety group in the state of Texas. We're the largest Crime Stoppers in the country. We're the only Crime Stoppers in the country with its own building, and we're the only Crime Stoppers in the country that has different departments like mine. So it's been a very unique journey, and I've been involved in so many things, so many activities, so many things over the past 3 decades. I could probably sit and continue all night long, but I'll go ahead and answer any questions, and we'll go from there.
Well, we have plenty of time, so hold on. Let me knock myself off. Okay, let's try this again. I don't know where that echo is coming from. I swear. So, working at probation, what were some of the things that you saw?
Well, one of the reasons that I got into being a victim advocate was because I saw the system repeatedly fail the law abiding public. I saw the system that was caring more about mathematics and more about defendants' rights than they were for victims' rights. And I just got fed up one day and kind of let loose. And as I like to say, I let loose, and they in turn let me loose. And in the mayor's race in 1991, one issue in the city of Houston, and that was crime. And the reason being was we had a severe prison overcrowding problem, and inmates were only serving 1 month for every year they were sentenced to. So if you got 20 years in prison, you were getting out in less than 2 years. And it was wrecking havoc amongst the city, and people really didn't know what was going on. They had a quota system that I had documentation of, and I ended up on a little known show called 48 Hours with it. And that kind of set me off on a new trail in a new position. And at that time, one of the candidates running for mayor met with several victims organizations, parents of murdered children, MAD, People Against Violent Crime. I was doing some volunteer work with them, and back then I was known as a straight shooter, which in the early 90s was practically unheard of from somebody in the criminal justice system to be telling victims really what's going on instead of just telling them answers they might want to, just to placate them. So after he was elected, I was asked to start this position. And one of the great interviews of all time was the mayor's chief of staff looked at me and said, I haven't the faintest bleepingest idea what you're supposed to bleep and do. So get the bleep out of here and do what you need to do. Because no other city in the country had a victim advocate staffed out of a mayor's office. Nor could they put a manual in front of you and say, read the manual. So I was given a very unique opportunity to build something from scratch and mold it in my own image. My staff consisted of me. We got along real well, and they were very subservient, and my agenda got followed to the T. So I learned very early on in my career the media would be my most powerful ally, a tool and a weapon and an arsenal, and if properly used, can be an agent of change. So I developed relationships with local and national media. They needed me for the stories, for referrals, and so forth. So that kind of set me on everything that's been happening from there. So as far as the media goes, I've done every possible media you could possibly imagine, going from 60 Minutes to 48 Hours to multiple appearances on 2020, Dateline, A&E, Oxygen, Discovery, different talk shows, CNN, Fox. The only show I did actually turn down, believe it or not, was Jerry Springer. So
yeah, I saw you on what was it? Something a killer, surviving a killer or something.
Surviving a serial killer.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
I
true
saw
crime
you on
genre. I mean, the true crime genre has just exploded in the last few years. I mean, this past summer, I filmed 4 segments for the Oxygen Channel and Discovery ID, and one for Netflix that's waiting to come out.
Okay. Do you have a YouTube browser on by chance?
Nope, I do not.
No. Okay. Well, we have a couple questions for you. One of them is, can I ask about Audrey's Law?
Yeah, actually, what happened it was a little over a year ago. You had 11-year-old Audrey Cunningham was abducted, raped, and murdered by a career habitual offender. And when we found out the criminal history of the offender, one of the offenses kind of stood out. He was originally charged with indecency with a child, and they pled it down to enticing a child. And because they pled it down to enticing a child meant he didn't have to register as a sex offender. And the family felt that if they had known he was a sex offender, they would have kept 11-year-old Audrey Cunningham away from that. So I said, my position's always been I can yell and scream about injustices all day long. I would much prefer to find a solution and or a remedy. So I told the family we're going to get a bill, we're going to name it after Audrey, and we're going to clear up this glitch. So I went up and testified. family went up and testified. It was unanimously approved by both the Senate and the House, and right now it's just waiting the governor's signature. So Audrey Cunningham is a catalyst for change. And that's kind of one of my mantras doing what I do is I can't go back and change what happened to you or your family, but we try to make things better for others to come along, and you've achieved a lasting legacy. And when I went up and testified, and I know this got a lot of airplay, but this just because I was testifying from the heart, I basically said I'm really sick and tired of naming bills and laws after dead kids, but that's the reality. And I spurted off a bunch of different laws that have named, like Amber's Law and all sorts of other different laws that we have. So that's Audrey's Law. So it will go into effect, and that's something taking a negative and turning it into positive.
So what did the offender end up happening to him?
He ended up taking a plea deal. He got life without parole, so he'll never breathe free air again.
Okay.
So at
Here's
least
another question.
Parents now, the way the law reads is anyone convicted of an offense like grooming will now have to register as a sex offender. So if McDougal, who is the offender, committed the same offense that he did over 20 years ago, even though he pled down, he would have had to register as a sex offender.
Okay. Here's another question for you. Says, what's your most remembered case, and was it solved?
The most memorable case that I've ever been involved with, hands down, has to do with a serial killer by the name of Coral Eugene Watts. Coral Eugene Watts is probably one of the nation's most prolific serial killers no one's ever heard about. He killed 13 Houston area women, 1981, 1982. He's credited with over 40 murders nationally and internationally across the border in Canada, Michigan, Indiana, Canada, and so forth. Watts killed by 3 forms. He killed by stabbing, strangulation, and drowning. He never robbed any of his victims. He never sexually assaulted any of his victims. He just liked to kill. And they were all races, all ages, all socioeconomic backgrounds. How Watts got caught is an incredible story. He had murdered a young lady earlier that morning by drowning her. That evening, a young lady's walking up to her apartment in Spring Branch, right off of Bingle and Hammerley. And she's walking up the stairs. Watts came from behind her, grabbed her, choked her, rendered her unconscious, opened the apartment door, and was surprised that she had a roommate. He tied 19-year-old Melinda Aguilar's hands behind his back, threw Melinda in the back bedroom, dragged Lori to the bathtub, and proceeded to fill it with water. Melinda Aguilar, 19 years old, 5'2", 90 pounds, managed to get up and kick open a balcony door. She got there and then jumped from the second floor and did a somersault. She ran into a police officer who neighbors had called because of all the commotion. Watts tried to flee. He was caught. Lori, who was in the bathtub, was revived. She lived. She doesn't remember anything to this day with the exception of being grabbed from behind. They cut a deal with Watts. In return for leading authorities to where he buried 3 bodies, he was given a 60-year sentence for burglary with intent to commit murder, 1982. What they didn't tell the families was that Texas had a law called the Mandatory Release Law. And that law meant that as long as Coral Eugene Watts maintained good behavior in prison, he would eventually be released. And how the good time law works is you get 2 days for every day served credit. So Watts was actually scheduled to be legally released in the year 2006. 2002, victims' families and myself decided that the world needed to know that a serial killer was going to be released. It was the 20th anniversary. We did a big celebration. We brought in families from all over the country, and we got a lot of media attention for obvious reasons. We started doing every possible show you can imagine. I was on Fox News one night when Bill O'Reilly was one of the hosts. And O'Reilly looks at me and he goes, "You guys execute everybody in Texas. You're going to release this guy?" And I said, "Yeah, Bill, you'll never stereotype us again." He goes, "That's nuts." And I said, "Yeah, Bill, this is why if we decided if we're going to legally release a serial killer, we're going to go down kicking, screaming, fighting, and the whole world's going to know." Michigan, where he originally came from and was a suspect in numerous murders, forms a cold case task force trying to find something. Fast forward, it's 2004. We're still getting nowhere. Watts is 2 years from being one of the first serial killers ever to be legally released. And the story I'm about to tell you, if you don't believe in divine intervention, you will after you hear this. We did a segment for the Today Show, and they reran it that evening on MSNBC. And the Michigan Attorney General was on pleading for the public's help in an unsolved 1979 murder in which they had a sketch of the suspect. An individual named Joe Foy comes home from a suburb of Detroit, picks up the remote, starts flipping channels. He stops on that segment with the Michigan Attorney General, and he screams to his wife, "That's the guy I saw kill the girl in the alley 25 years ago." The next day, he calls the Michigan Attorney General, and they're like, "Yeah, sure, bud, give me a break." They look. This guy's listed as an eyewitness in a 1979 murder, was sitting in a filing cabinet in Ferndale, Michigan, because they thought he was doing a life sentence in Texas. This was the case they ultimately ended up charging him with and then later convicting. We spent a lovely 2 weeks in Pontiac, Michigan in 2004. The trial was covered live by Court TV, and they convicted him of that murder and sentenced him to life without parole in Michigan. But no one gave us a snowball's chance in hell, and we just put our minds together and we just did what we did. But if we don't do what we do, he would have been out. There are women walking around today because of our efforts. Nothing will ever top that one.
Right. That's amazing right there.
There's a book, if you ever want to read the book, it's written by a friend of mine who sadly passed away at a much too young age. Corey Mitchell and I, we worked on 4 books together, true crime books. And the book on Watts is called Evil Eyes. So if you ever want to read about what we did and Watts and all the strategies and everything that we did, I would encourage everybody to read the book Evil Eyes. And actually, we filmed this summer, and it's supposed to come out this summer on the Oxygen Channel, an hour special on one of the nation's most prolific serial killers you never heard of.
Evil Eyes.
Yep. That's
Okay.
what Watts actually told authorities how he picked out his victims, which frankly was a bunch of BS because all his victims were at night. You couldn't see their eyes.
Yeah. I think I'm having StreamYard is driving me crazy right now. Am I echoing on your side?
Yes, you are.
How about now?
Now you're good.
Okay. And there's a lot of people using StreamYard right now, so I don't know if that's what it is or what.
That's fine. I'm easy to work with.
So, Anthony Shore.
Yeah, Anthony Shore, that was another one. I was actually at that execution. And just to give you a little bit of background, in 1995, it was some of you guys watching this probably might remember one of the most horrific murders in Houston's history, and that was the Jennifer Ertman, Elizabeth Pena, the Ertman Pena murders of the 14 and 16-year-old girls when they stumbled upon a gang initiation. And that's another one of Corey's books called Pure Murder. That was the case that allowed victims' families to witness executions. It took us 2 years, but we finally got it passed, where victims' families can, at their request, witness the execution. So for full disclosure, I've been to 9 executions with victims' families.
That's amazing.
One of them was Anthony Shore. So I come from a great deal of experience on what it's like the day of the execution and after the execution, because I'm there front and center with the families.
So, did you have insight on how he gave that interview?
Hmm?
How he gave that interview about the young girl he killed?
Anthony Shore?
Yes.
I don't have any insight into any interviews he gave, but I
Well, he
do.
was saying that he picked her up.
Was this Diana Raballer?
Yeah, they became close.
Yeah.
He was grooming her. He wanted to go further. She didn't want to go that far. He killed her,
Yeah,
and
and
so
I was involved in Shore very early on when 9-year-old Diana Raballer went missing, and her body I think was found somewhere in close to a dumpster by Dairy Queen, and we got involved in that because the family wanted her buried in her native land of Honduras, and we had to go all the way to the United States Attorney General, who at that time was Janet Reno, to secure permission for that as well. So that was my initial involvement with Anthony Shore, other than attending some of the trial as well. And then I got to know their surviving victim, which her name will remain confidential and anonymous to this day. But there was a young girl that survived, and hearing her harrowing tale was absolutely blew me away. Somehow she ended up getting away from Anthony Shore. So Shore was a real piece of work. He was given the not so affectionate nickname the Strangler or the Tourniquet Killer because that was his method of execution. But I'll tell you what, an interesting tidbit about Shore after he was executed, I got a call the next day from prison officials, and they said, "Hey, you're not going to believe this." He goes, "Anthony Shore willed his body and his quote to a murderabilia dealer. And murderabilia dealers are the ones who peddle items from serial killers for sale." And I said, "You got to be kidding me! He's got his body."
okay, I unplugged the speakers. Hold on a second. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Driving me crazy. So, what else about Anthony Shore can you tell us?
Anthony Shore abused his own children. And his own children, I mean, after he was sentenced to death, I mean, there was no love lost between Shore's children and Anthony Shore. They hated him from the get go, and just his egotistical, narcissistic behavior. He was actually given probation for that, and he was actually living across the street from a school at the time, and that brought a lot of angry people out in the Heights area when they found out that Anthony Shore, a child molester, was living across the street from a school. So Shore, he contested his original execution. He tried to buy time. He ended up in some sort of cahoots with another inmate named Larry Swearingen. And then right before Shore was actually going to be executed, all of a sudden, Swearingen is claiming that he's the one that killed everybody. So that put everything at halt. So Anthony Shore ended up buying himself an additional 90 days of life, but it finally came to fruition, and the families that were there felt much satisfaction in releasing him leave this earth. He didn't deserve to breathe free air, period. His victims were all young girls, most of them, with the exception of the young girl that survived, they were all Hispanic females. So that's what he targeted.
So, you have another question. It said, didn't one of his daughters work against him?
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, his daughter, she she made no bones about her hatred for her dad. And normally you don't see family members that are bellowing for their family member to be executed, but both daughters wanted him gone, and I think they feel much better, about Anthony Shore leaving this world.
So as far as profiling him, did you profile him at all, or did?
It was he was, he worked for a Southwestern Bell, so they gave him access to people's homes. He was able to go to different parts all over. He was a musician, and that gave him access in the evening as well. And, thankfully, how he got caught, if he hadn't molested his own daughters, and that's what actually did him in, was they were able to get DNA from. And that was a requirement of any sex offender at that time. So if he hadn't molested his own daughters, who knows how many more people would have ended up dead. So it's in a strange, unique, form. His own daughters did him in, yet he's the one that perpetrated a horrific act on his daughters. So, you can't really script what happened.
Okay, I apologize.
Well,
Is that any
I
better?
actually have a letter that Shore wrote and a very poor drawing of Selma Hayek. And one of the things that I have in my one of the projects that I undertake is I monitor sites that sell items from serial killers, and I even gave it a cool, catchy name called Murderabilia when I first discovered this industry. So I ended up picking up an item that somebody was selling from Shore, just because I knew it was going to end up being valuable, obviously because it was a Texas case as well. So in my duffel bag in my office, I am the proud, dubious owner of multiple hair samples from serial killers.
Oh,
I have
wow.
fingernail clippings from a serial killer. I have prison issued socks, clothing, artwork, letters, autographs, you name it, I have it. All peddled on the open market for profit. Strangest project I've ever encountered in my 30 plus years.
Yeah, I would. Really up West Point.
You broke up entirely, so I couldn't hear anything.
Oh no!
I hear you now.
You hear me now?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I just recently stumbled upon a museum that's in West Point, Tennessee, I think, and they have
No,
it's called
it's
the
in
Alcatraz.
Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. They have a true crime
Yes,
museum.
Pigeon
Yeah.
Forge. You're right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm actually going to be there next month.
That is awesome. Did you sell any of your memorabilia to them? If you don't mind me
No,
asking.
I wanted it because I started crafting laws. I was of the perspective you shouldn't be able to rob, rape, and murder and then turn around and make a buck off of it. I believe in free enterprise and capitalism, but I do believe you got to draw the line somewhere, and this is where we drew it. So I obtained a lot of items to show elected officials that this is a burgeoning business and that people are making money off some of the most high profile killers in this country's history. And in order to do that, you actually have to have the items in your possession. So that's kind of what I was doing, as far as the murderabilia market goes. We have about half a dozen states that I've worked with that have laws called notoriety for profit laws, meaning that you can't profit from selling items that you produced in prison on the open market. Most people still to this day think we have what's called Son of Sam laws, which means that you can't profit from your crimes. Most people are unaware that Son of Sam laws were ruled unconstitutional by the United States Supreme Court in 1991 involving a mafia hitman informant by the name of Henry Hill. Do you know who Henry Hill is?
Yes, I do.
Okay, what movie?
Goodfellas.
You got it. Yep. The lead character in the movie Goodfellas was actually responsible for overturning Son of Sam laws in this country, because Simon and Schuster's wanted to pay him $250,000 for the rights to their story, and New York sued under the Son of Sam statute, and it went all the way to Supreme Court. Supreme Court frowns on any language restricting free speech. Okay. So what I started doing was crafting laws not dealing with free speech, but simply the issue of profiting. In other words, talk all you want, scratch, sniff, doodle, paint, whatever. You just don't make money from it.
Right. So, are you familiar with any cases outside of Texas?
Hmm?
Are you familiar with any cases outside of Texas?
I'm familiar with a lot of cases, yeah.
Okay. Because one of the cases that I've been following very closely on my channel is the Idaho 4 case.
Oh,
The
yeah.
four
What's his
students
name?
that
Cole,
were murdered in Idaho?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit, not necessarily on that case, but your experience on the investigative process of a crime scene?
Well, in a crime scene like that, you can have multiple different investigators. You're going to bring in the best of the best, and you're going to make sure every I and T are dotted, because you realize the entire world is watching you, and especially a case of that magnitude as well. And, the eyes of the state of Idaho, and not just Idaho, but the country, are looking upon that. And you do not want to do anything that could possibly, destroy any of the evidence that can be submitted in court and so forth. So it's going to be interesting to see how they proceed. I still believe they're seeking the death penalty on that particular case. And if you're going to have the death penalty, that's why you have the death penalty. It should be reserved for the worst of the worst. And certainly he merits, when you take out 4 people like that, then you don't, from my perspective, you don't deserve to breathe free air. So, but these cases take astronomically, for whatever reason, so long to come to trial. And then even further, even if you are convicted and sentenced to death, you're looking at minimum, if you're lucky, 10 years before anything might be carried out.
So in your experience of seeing serial killers or killers in general to use knives,
That's a
is it
rare
very
weapon.
possible
Yeah.
to kill more than one person in a short amount of time?
It's unusual to use that type of weapon, and that shows you how personal it is, because a knife means you got to get up close. I mean, most serial killers don't really. I'd have to go back and really, brainstorm on how many of them use knives in their app, but I'm going to bet I can count them on my 2 hands and take off at least one hand. It's pretty rare, because it's first of all, you're taking a lot of chances with yourself if you're going to do that type of murder, because it's so intimate and it's so personal, and obviously you're going to leave a lot of clues and DNA and everything that's going to be upon them. So it's usually not the weapon of choice for a serial killer. And I will tell you, for full disclosure, I do have a very long-term relationship with one of the nation's most notorious serial killers. And he and I have been corresponding for over 2 decades. And we actually met in person, and we filmed over 2 hours of him and I talking a couple of years ago.
Oh, wow. So what's it like? What's it like interviewing a serial killer?
Well, the serial killer that I met is actually the son of Sam, David Berkowitz.
Oh.
And David Berkowitz has been an invaluable help for me. He and I have been corresponding I got volumes of back and forth with him. The reason he's so valuable for me, on the murderabilia side, he gets a lot of requests for items, people wanting stuff, and he just ships them all to me. So I get to see who's putting out, who's requesting, what are they saying. So it's a real rare when you get a personal insight into how this industry works, and how people reach out to him. He sent me a letter a couple of years ago. This supposedly young girl from Europe, and she starts off saying, "Dear David, you're my favorite serial killer." So, so
Wow.
I went with my colleague and I. We went in the summer of 21. But yeah, 20. I believe it was 21, and we got permission from the New York Department of Corrections to go meet with him in the prison, bring our equipment, and we actually have a podcast on our Crime Stoppers, The Balanced Voice. If anyone wants to watch the interview that I had, along with and clips of.
We have another question for you. What
We
do
have
people
another
want to
question
buy the
for you. What do
most?
people want to buy the most?
Um, artwork. Artwork is more personal. It's also more pricey as well because that means someone actually took the time to do that. I have one artwork sketches done by an Alabama death row inmate, and in the sketches, he actually inserts victims' names in the sketches.
Wow.
Wow.
When I think of artwork, I think of
I
John
think
Wayne
of
Gacy.
John Wayne Gacy.
Gacy became rich on death row. I mean,
Yeah.
he was banking in thousands. He had dealers on the outside that were selling his art. Still to this day, Gacy artwork is pricey and very valuable, and obviously he's not producing anymore. So that's what makes it a hard find. But Gacy was really the one of the first ones that tap in on how to use your fame and how to profit from committing these types of crimes.
So you want to tell us
So you
about
want to
one of
tell
the
us about one
foundations
of the
that you're
foundations that
associated
you're
with,
associated with?
the Murdered
The
Families
murdered families.
Yeah, I serve on the board
Victims?
of Parents of Murdered Children and Surviving Family Members of Homicide. It's a national organization. We have one of the largest chapters in Houston. I've been with them for over 30 years. So I'm intimately involved with homicide survivors of all ilk and kind, whether it's your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your child, your aunt, your uncle, your niece, your best friend. So we meet the second Tuesday, so which we actually met last night at Crime Stoppers. Whatever the second Tuesday in the month is, from 7 to 9 p.m. we meet. And the meetings are open, anybody can attend. We usually have a cadre of law enforcement that are there, and also people from the district attorney's office. Sometimes elected officials will come by and offer their support as well. And it's mainly an opportunity for victims' families to talk about themselves, their cases, what's going on. If they have questions, get their questions answered as well. And we do a series of events throughout the year. In late September, we do a thing called National Day of Remembrance, and that's in which we commemorate and honor all those who lost loved ones to homicide. And then the second Saturday in December, we do a holiday memorial tree ceremony at Crime Stoppers, which we have multiple trees that are decorated with personalized ornaments and pictures of their loved ones, and they remain up throughout the holiday season.
Nice.
Nice.
So working
So
with
working
this
with
type of
this type of
population all these
population all
years,
these years,
did it
did it
mess with the
mess with
family
the
life at
family
all?
life at
Did it
all? Did
mess
it
with the
mess with the
kids? Did it
kids?
mess
Did it
with
mess with
anybody in
anybody
your
in
No,
your
actually,
immediate
what
immediate
circle?
circle?
actually, it makes me appreciate my lot in life, and you realize the little problems that you might have and little nuances would pale in comparison to what some of the people that I know that are going through. So it makes me very much more appreciative of everything that I have involved in my life as well.
That's very cool. That's very cool. Well, is there anything else that you'd
Well,
like to
there else
discuss?
you'd like to discuss?
I'm sorry, what?
You said you have plenty of
You said you
knowledge.
have
I'm all
plenty of
ears.
knowledge. I'm all ears.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I've have done over 25 pieces of legislation to enhance victims' rights and public safety. So I'm at the Capitol quite a bit during a legislative session trying to push laws. So I've been doing that since 1993. My mantra has always been is crime victims are the only unwilling participants in the criminal justice system. Everyone else chose their role. Law enforcement, attorneys, judges, prosecutors, probation officers, parole officers, victim advocates, but no one ever said, pick me, pick me. I want to be a victim of crime. So it's the least we can do, particularly in government, is to be looking out for victims' rights, their due process, and their well-being. And that's kind of what I make sure that victims are being treated with dignity and respect in the criminal justice system.
We have a couple questions for you. One of them said, does he have any idea what's going on with those two immigrants that murdered that 12-year-old girl about a year ago or so?
Yeah, Jocelyn Nungery became a lightning rod for a lot of reasons, and it touched a nerve, not just in Houston but nationwide. And I got to know Jocelyn's mother, Alexis, and her family throughout their journey. But both of them are in custody. They will never get out, and they're waiting for a death penalty. In capital cases like that, it's very rare to go to trial less than 2 years. It's just even under normal circumstances. So I would imagine you're probably not going to see anything probably for the next, maybe you might see in a year or so, but right now it's just a wait game. And based on what I know, the evidence is overwhelming, and I would be shocked if a jury didn't sentence them to death.
Right. Another question you have is, did you attend the execution of Spencer Goodman,
No, I did
Cecil
not.
Ham?
No, I am familiar with the case. I did not. I can tell you, I attended the 3 executions on the Ertman Pena case, which had more defendants sentenced to death row in modern true crime history in the last century, and that was originally 5 defendants that were sentenced to death. 3 were executed, 2 were commuted to life by the Supreme Court, and a juvenile was sentenced to 40 years. So I was with 3 executions on that. I was at the execution of one of the most high-profile executions in Texas history, and that was the first female, Carla Faye Tucker, who was better known as the pickaxe murderess. That was nuts, being in Huntsville that day. That was an all-out circus. There were over
I was young during that time. What was that case about?
Carla and her boyfriend were heavily involved in drugs and some other illegal activity, and there was a situation involving someone that they felt ripped them off, and they went there, and unbeknownst to them, he had a young lady with him that night, and they stabbed, and Carla Faye took out a pickaxe and just started swinging and pickaxed her. That's why she's called the pickaxe murderess. And she became a cause celeb on death row. There were over 200 media satellite trucks in Huntsville the night of the execution. The streets were roped off. There was a guy walking around downtown Huntsville dragging a pickaxe. There were poster boards. I mean, it was I remember the Sam Houston State University students were coming down, started chanting "Euro trash, go home." I think half of Europe and Asia was there covering this case, and I was there with the husband of the young lady that was killed that evening as well. And it was the way I describe it, it was like being an extra in the Ten Commandments movie. Anyone who had an agenda was out there that night. All that was missing was popcorn and peanuts that were coming out there. It was. But on a positive note, we did stiff Larry King that night, so that was actually the best thing that happened afterwards.
That sounds wild. So what's it like in the execution chambers? I mean, I know that you can only walk through a window.
Yeah.
But what's the experience like?
So what it's like when we get up there, we go through a briefing, And then we're in a conference room and we're quarantined from everything from like 3 o'clock on. We're in a conference room, kind of waiting, and we wait until we get a signal from the warden that the execution is going to proceed. One of the Ertman Pena cases, we waited in the conference room 3 hours and 17 minutes. And I actually wrote a blog on the behind the scenes on what it was like to wait that long, not knowing if you were going to proceed or not. And it was pretty excruciating for the family. So you wait, and then you're brought into the chamber. You're walked across. Everything is separate. So for those that are there on behalf of the inmate, you never see them, and they never see you. There's no interaction. There's a wall in between the chamber, so they're on one side, you're on one side. But I also tell families that keep in mind that inside the chamber, when you're there, there's also media there, and they're going to be looking at you for any type of expression. So if you do something, they are going to jot that down. So just be cautious and cognizant of what your reactions are when you're in a chamber. When you're there, it's not like a movie. It's not like the Green Mile where they say dead man walking. The condemned is already strapped to the gurney. They're conscious. They can see. They know who's there. And then eventually the warden will ask if they have any final statements. I've been there where some have been remorseful. I've been where some were total jackasses, and just basically the last one I was at, we were waiting to see if Bob Frada was going to say anything to his son about having his mother killed, and they asked him if he wanted to say anything. He just went no. Peter Cantu, the ringleader in the Ertman Pena cases, they asked him, and I'll never forget, he looked up at the ceiling and he went, nah. Just like that, nah. And then you wait, and eventually the medical person comes in, declares him dead. You don't really see it's, people say you see it. Occasionally you might see a gurgle or a little shake, but it's really clinical in nature, and it's, without debating any it's like going to the vet and putting a dog or a cat to sleep, really, and then you're let out. At that time, we already know if any of the family members want to address the media. On multiple occasions, I've done that on behalf of the family, and I did that for Anthony Shore as well, because the families really don't want to have to deal with that. So I go out and address the media and then take any questions. And it's a very emotionally draining, grueling day. It's not a quote festive party like atmosphere like some might want to portray it. It's like time stops when you're there.
That's interesting. Very interesting. Well, does the chat have any questions for Andy? I don't think in Texas we have a shortage.
No, we're given the not so affectionate nickname by the national media, the death penalty capital of the world. I keep telling them we're the victims' rights capital of the world, but they don't want to use that moniker as well. So
Yeah.
it's, another little interesting tidbit you'll find fascinating is it's a recent phenomenon, whether it's still going on, I'd have to check, but we found that a lot of Texas death row inmates were married to European women on death row. And several of the executions that I've been at, actually, the soon-to-be widow was attending. One of them, the wife of one of the Ertman Pena was from Finland. There was another one that was from Germany. So it's very interesting to see, who ends up, during an execution. For whatever reason, European women seem to be fascinated with We had one guy, Bob Frada, who was married, divorced, and engaged on death row.
Wow, that's wild.
Yep.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I'd like
No,
for
you
you to
bet.
come up again. I mean, hopefully the sound will be better.
No, thanks for
We'll
having me
have
on, and it's never dull. And I'll leave you with this lasting thought. Have you ever seen the movie Gladiator? Which I'm sure you have.
yes.
There's a great scene in that movie, in the beginning of the movie, where Maximus is exhorting his troops. And he says, "What we do in life echoes in eternity." That's what I do as a victim advocate. I can't go back and change what happened to you or your family, but we make things better for others to come along, and you've achieved a lasting legacy. And I'll just leave you with that thought.
Nice. One more question, really quick.
Okay?
The man that killed Audrey, what was the loophole?
The loophole was he was charged with indecency with a child, and if he would have been convicted of that, he would have had to register as a sex offender. But they cut a plea deal and they pled it down to another offense called enticing a child. And enticing a child meant you didn't have to register as a sex offender. That's now forever going to be changed.
Is there any donation links on the Crime Stoppers or anything like that that we could donate?
Yeah, there's we have Crime Stoppers. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, so we rely on several galas that we do and all sorts of grants and so forth. But I can probably send you the link on that as well.
Please do that. That way I can
Sure.
pin it to the live.
Okay. Yeah, you
And
bet.
well, thank you so much for
You
all you
bet.
do. And I hope to have you again up sometime.
You bet. Never dull and boring. Always something different.
All righty.
Take care, sir.
Hey, all
Thank you.
right. Have a good
All
one.
right. You bet.
Bye bye. Is my sound good now? Man, that aggravates me. My sound was like echoing. That is annoying. No problems with all that other stuff. And then I get a good guess and my sound goes crazy. That is terrible. So, what did y'all get from that interview? I heard quite a bit, and there's a lot I didn't really hear. I hope to have Andy back. He has a wealth of knowledge, and I want to pick his brain some more. Yeah, our connection was bad. I don't know who it was. I really don't. I mean, because I unplugged the speakers, I unplugged this, I went out, came back in. Um, my anxiety was going through the roof. So, what y'all think about that interview? I thought it was pretty good. He had a wealth of knowledge. I mean, he corresponded with the son of Sam killer, David Berkowitz, and even did an interview with him. Isn't that a small world? I don't know anything about the son of Sam killer. I guess I'm gonna have to go and watch and learn about it because I don't know anything about him. Yeah, mine was just I don't know, man. I don't know. I apologize for that. I really do because man, that was one of those interviews that even if there're just three people in here, I want that wealth of information, because I'm on fire now, to know somebody who has made such a difference in the world, especially with all the knowledge and all the people he's encountered, the victims' families, all that he does. It's just amazing. You know what I mean? So I appreciate you guys being in here. And yeah, 30 years. 30 years. And like he said, people that get the death penalty, they usually wait a minimum of 10 years, so I'd like to learn a little bit more about what he knows about the Idaho 4 case and the Delphi and the Heuermann case and some more Texas cases. I really don't know a lot of Texas killers, but there's a lot. There's been a lot. Um, and those of y'all that are looking for Jeff's number, he's at a shoot right now, so he's out of the loop. But why don't y'all email him? If you don't have his email, um, I'm sure you'll watch this on replay. Leave him a message in the chat. Nina, you want to come up for a little bit? I sent you the link. I'm not ready to get off yet. There's the link, Nina. Well, I know how to get in touch with him. I have a personal number and his email and all that stuff. I'm sure we can schedule a time when we both have a little bit more, you know, a little bit more time. It's late at night and, I'm not sure what his schedule is tomorrow, so I didn't want to keep him on very late. You know what I mean? Trying to be respectful. So, have y'all had a chance to look at the Anthony Shore case? It is horrific. Horrific. And what I wanted him to get into was the part where Anthony was trying to refrain from killing. He got to a point where he said, "Well, I'm not going to kill anymore." But he still was hurting women. And he'd get to the point where he'd rape them, I think, and then he would do the tourniquet and even start turning the tourniquet until he had that moment of clarity, and then he stopped and let a couple live, if I'm correct. I mean, I watched that a long time ago. So when I saw him on Surviving a Serial Killer, I tripped out because I was like, oh my gosh, there's Andy right there. And, it was just interesting to me to he was so knowledgeable on that show, just, doing the interviews. Like you said, he's been doing it for 30 years. But if nobody wants to come up here, I guess I'm going to let you guys go for the night. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. Hopefully, we'll be able to fix it next time and we'll have a cleaner show. But I'm sure you can hear him more than you can probably hear me clear. So, y'all go rewatch it. Okay? Y'all have a good night. Maestro, cue that music.